Music school teaches you how to play, not how to build a life. So you hustle, you audition, you stay busy. But busy is not always safe. Orchestrated Way is the podcast for freelance classical musicians building modern lives in music. Each episode shares real stories and simple strategy from artists who learned how to make music work in real life. If you're ready to stop waiting and start building, welcome. This is Orchestrated Way. Stop surviving, start designing.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Orchestrated Way. We are back from a slight hiatus from our recent episodes, but we're happy to be back here with Antoine as well as our featured guest today. We have Kristen Bellman. Kristen and I go way back in the Ithaca days, and now she is taking in performance psychology, combining it with counseling, combining it to helping musicians overcome any obstacle that they are going through with their mind, with even performance practice, I believe, as well, Kristen. Yeah, and I mean, she's done light years of work with this kind of um, intersection of performance psychology and music. Kristen, we're happy to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So let's kick it off. What got you involved with music and cello specifically?
Yeah, so we're going way back in time. Um, I think originally what pulled me into music is that I used to believe that all objects had feelings, inanimate objects, and I got pulled into the cello because nobody else was choosing the cello on instrument selection day, and I didn't want its feelings being hurt.
Very brave little
What?
toaster.
Yeah,
Yes, pretty much. And I, yeah, so I fell in love with it right there and then. And it was like it needed me as much as I needed it. And I think I didn't realize how monumental that decision would make my life. And that kind of every decision after that was going to be with the cello beside me.
nice. And
Nice.
it's crazy because in today's society, like cello, I mean, everybody wants to learn how to play the cello. So I'm kind of shocked to hear this.
It's
So
like the
just
instrument now. Yeah.
it is literally the instrument, especially with like two cellos and the piano guys. I'm just like, wait, what? And yeah, 20 something plus years before. Shocker. So what led to the profession of wanting to pursue music?
Yeah, I think that that's a little bit of a deeper story. So, um, as it should be. So throughout my elementary, middle school, I started when I was in grade school, elementary level. Throughout those years into secondary, middle school, high school, I again, it was there for me as a big support. Not to dive too deep into it, but like I lost my dad at a younger age, and I pulled into music as a way to grieve and as a way to express emotion. Um, I really didn't realize like how much it was like a source of healing for me, as well as like a way I could remember my dad when I needed to. And so I knew early on that music and emotion were really strongly integrated, and just even as a way that it can be healing. But I think like really what kind of pulled me into the performance beyond that was my joy of accessing the flow state. And I think like if you've ever heard of that before, it's where like it just feels like everything's working and you're just like, oh, this is magic. And you just get the chills and you just don't have to think and you just like forget everything outside of that moment. And that was really like those are the moments that pulled me into wanting to do this forever. And I was like, I want this for the rest of my life. And I as a cellist, like we in high school, we pulled into like a full orchestra setting, and all of a sudden, I was like, "This is magic." Because string music is beautiful, but I love the textures and how how much we can make with all the different sounds, and that was what pulled me into wanting to do it professionally. So I went into undergrad to pursue cello performance, actually with a med degree originally. I was double, and then I quickly dropped that as I realized I did not like the sight of blood, but that's beyond the point. So I came back over into pursuing music full time and actually got pulled into education because I was also able to access the flow state in education. And I realized that that was also a way that I could give the gift to others of what I was loving about it. And so I think it was purely me wanting to share the love of what I encountered with music is why I wanted to pursue it professionally. Um, you can go on to sing even to grad school where we met. Like
Yes.
I believe I think I was your TA for a little bit.
You were, yeah, you were my instructor for class cello.
Yeah. Yeah. Going way
Yeah,
back.
yes.
And I loved teaching, and I think that was where I learned, oh, I don't just love teaching younger students, I love teaching people in general. And just it was just a different thing. You could talk shop and you're like, oh, you get it, okay, I don't have to describe anything to you. And I think that was where I realized, like, I really love working with young students, I love working with adults, and I love working with like pre-professionals at transitional stage going into like grad school and going into other areas. But grad school was a big pivotal point because I, throughout my younger years into grad school, I was struggling a lot with performance anxiety, which is what pulled me into wanting to take an introductory support psychology class at Ithaca. And that was a big, big moment for me because it connected so many pieces of what I saw as a teacher, of what I saw as a performer, what I saw as a friend, to how we could better ourselves in performance. But it gave me answers saying, oh, there's not something wrong with me as performance anxiety. There's ways that we can work around it. We just maybe don't have the tools to learn how to navigate this. It's often like an overlooked, overspoken about topic, I think, because it comes up a lot, and I think we all experience it. And so that was like a big turning point for me, especially entering the performance psychology world. And so I don't know, I can pause there for a minute because I feel like there's a lot, but I have a pretty long story.
Yeah, no, we have like 50 or more minutes to go on about this kind of story. But Antoine, what do you think about all this?
I guess that kind of informs my next question of kind of do you feel like some of your history and some of the things, a little bit of maybe the tragedy with your father kind of informed some of this, and wanting to connect with people on that level and kind of transitioning. Because ever do you describe yourself kind of as a music educator turned licensed counselor slash performance skills coach? Can you talk a little bit about how you have seen that transition, and some of the benefits of that transition in your career?
Yeah, so I Ithaca was that big turning point for me. It was my master's of cello, and I learned that there was a whole new field that actually answered the questions for what I had been searching for my whole like early childhood experience with the cello, going into um, even my adult years. And so it was a preview that all of a sudden you could replace the word athlete with musician, and you had this whole new manual for the mind. Um, I decided at that point I was going to try to use that one class as a way to explore if I can apply what I wanted to in a private lesson setting or in the classroom or as a teacher. And I still found I lacked in a lot of the insight and the knowledge. Like I was still pulling out a lot of the same techniques that my teachers had provided me, like eat a banana, you'll be fine, keep practicing, keep performing, you'll be fine. But for some reason, for me, it just didn't get better. Now, we might go back and say, well, maybe it was rooted in some deeper emotional work with my dad. But then I think if you come back as a, as like an educator and you're looking at it as an educator lens, it could be the idea like how we're teaching and how we're approaching our classroom culture and things like that. So for me, once I did the introductory class, I wanted to learn how I could integrate it into a classroom setting. So I taught private cello students for a number of years. After that, I had a really pretty massive studio of about, I remember counting 60 to 64 students, 20 minutes to 30 minutes to an hour long lessons throughout the whole week. Like it was pretty busy. And I was having this same conversations with my students, like, what do I do? And I would try to give them advice. And I struggled to apply what I learned in that class. So at that point is where I decided to go on to do a master's in sport and performance psychology. And I had hands-on experience with actually working with high elite level athletes, young athletes, ranging from like the grades I was teaching, like fourth, fifth, sixth grade, all the way through seniors in high school. And I had also was working within the university with some of the college students there as well on mental performance skills. And I just remember one day I looked up and I went from the practice room teaching a private lesson to a consultant role of working with somebody on their professional audition. And I did both of those in the same day. And I looked up and I was like, oh, this is the dream. I can do multiple things and I can wear these hats and do all these things. I can still access music and I can still do performance psychology. And so I going back to like how I started to apply it, I got pulled into actually being a middle school orchestra director. And I taught there for about 5 or 6 years and realized those same conversations were coming up. And now I had the skills. Now I knew how to integrate what I learned in the performance psychology degree, my master's degree, into the classroom. And so I started seeing how I was really loving the mental game of things. I saw how I could create culture that could develop confidence. I saw how I could create culture that developed practice motivations. And my kids would be excited to come get their instruments. Now, not 100%, but I could see how I could instill this motivation of, oh, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to try again. And it's okay to not be afraid, which going back to little sixth grade me, I performed a solo and I had a nervous breakdown and I didn't know what to do. My mom didn't know what to do. And my teachers, well, they did the best they could with what we were given like way long ago. So I could see how I could give back and I could become that resource for my principal called it the underdog. We could kind of come in and like help the people who really needed it and really needed help with confidence and help with that. And a lot of those students like ended up going on and maybe not into music as a profession, but they would go on to other areas of performance. And it was a piece that I was able to give them that transferred to other areas as well. So it was, I think in that lens, like that was really exciting for me to see that come to fruition. It was, I think if we're kind of getting into like how it shaped me as an educator, I think it always has, like, it's always been the lens I've seen everything through is how I can help people feel good and enjoy what they do. And that's the thread that carries into now is I want to help people enjoy what they do, no matter if we're working in as a counselor or we're working as a performance coach or we're having a music lesson or anything like that. Like, I just want people to enjoy what they do and share that.
Yeah,
This
absolutely.
raised, yeah, go ahead. Go
I
ahead
was
and
gonna say,
respond.
I think that's absolutely valuable. Like the camp I just went to, Glickman Popkin Bassoon camp. Literally, that's the vibe. We had a whole conversation one day where that was the point of like, okay, we're performing these recitals literally every single day, and like an extended one the 2 days before we leave. It's like, what is the whole point of this? Because it's not, because like we have some people there that like they've been playing bassoon for like maybe I think Lori said she literally picked the bassoon up like a couple of weeks ago. But she's been playing clarinet. She's a professional clarinet. She's a professional doubler on Broadway, so she's got experience in this space. But people have been doing it not as long, going all the way up to professional bassoonists who've been doing it for years. One of the camp counselors is Barrick Stees, who used to be the associate principal of the Cleveland Orchestra. So some very high caliber faculty on staff at this camp. But the point is getting out there, getting better, kind of as you say, working on some of those issues just to perform better, not necessarily to hit every single note in the run, but getting used to getting yourself out there, putting yourself out there, getting incrementally better. Because we don't go from like, level one to level 100 in a day. It's all incremental progress. So absolutely.
Yeah, and I wish I had a figure like yourself, Kristen, to be able to just navigate identity challenges in addition to, having to perform all the time and, knowing that you have to like seek yourself in the process, both emotionally, mentally, and physically. So I actually have a question for you related to identity. What advice would you give to people who are navigating, the performance freelance field or education or any denomination of freelancing and feel like their identity is being swallowed up into that role, but losing a sense of themselves?
That's a really great question. I'm going to take a second.
Yeah, please.
Because I want to be very thoughtful with this.
Yeah.
I can see. Hmm. I think if we're talking about the idea that we feel like we lose a sense of ourselves, it's often because we are pouring more or all of what we're focusing on into one area, and we're maybe ignoring or forgetting about the other areas. So I use the analogy or metaphor of like different cups that we have. And I think within our identity, we can have different types, different cups. So, say for instance, there's myself as a musician, there's myself as a mom, there's myself as a daughter, there's myself as a person, Kristen, there's myself as um, a teacher, kind of like we have all these different areas of ourselves. There's also myself who loves gardening. There's all these different areas outside of music. I think we can look at that. So I have a lot of different cups, if we will. And if I am only focused on myself as a musician and I'm pouring everything I have into that one cup as a performer, if that cup spills, it's going to feel like I'm losing a lot more. Versus if I'm able to start pour into different cups along the way while still pouring into that cup as a musician, if one cup spills, it's going to feel less detrimental because I'll still have other areas I can look at. I think often we might enter a mindset of all or nothing. And within that space, we can kind of see, okay, well, I'm going to lock myself in the practice room and focus only on this. And I'm not going to talk to my friends because I don't have time because I'm practicing, or I'm not going to reach out to my family, or I can't go to this, or I can't do that. And it feels like we're doing really great focused work, which we might be. But then what starts to happen is we start to lose those other areas of ourselves that help make us feel like ourselves. So I think when we're starting to look at the idea of identity and losing a sense of ourselves within the extensiveness of entrepreneurship, of teaching, of music, of this world, I see that being a piece that plays a major part of burnout. I think I can see that showing up with, I don't want to do this anymore because it took so much from me. So it's hard to change that dialogue in your mind to saying it is okay to set your instrument down, go grab a cup of coffee, spend 30, 45 minutes with a friend, and then you can come back. And sometimes that's even really great for your practicing too, because you'll be able to take a break, reset, allow that to sink in. It's not going to go anywhere. Those skills you developed in that hour aren't going to go anywhere for another hour. They'll come back. You can come back. In fact, it's going to pull it back even better because your mind's had a chance to reset and take a break. So I think if we start to notice that we're losing ourselves, I would suggest taking a step back and zooming out and saying, what areas might you feel like you want to be pouring into that you don't have access to? And what's one thing you could do to try to access that? Maybe it's a phone call. Maybe it's stepping outside and just getting some sunshine. Maybe it's watching a movie, taking a break, going out, grabbing something to eat, looking at your needs. So I think it's the idea of zooming out and saying, what is something that you feel like you're not allowing yourself to do? Or what do you feel like it's taking away from you? And just see where's the easiest point of access for that for yourself.
Oh my goodness, the amount of musicians that need to hear this
Yeah.
gospel right now that's coming out of your mouth. I'm just like, the amount of times, and you're aware a little bit of my story. We talked about this at TMEA when I saw you magically at the booth, on the opposite side of the entire exhibit hall. But literally, I did the all or nothing in several instances, whether it was I'm going to be an arts administrator, I'm going to be a performer solely, or, I'm going to build a teaching studio of 30 people in 2.5 days. And oh man, the amount of times where the all or nothing has truly like burned me out. And just going to put it out there, probably countless musicians out. This is so important that I love the metaphor of the cups. I mean, just the idea that, if it's full, don't fill it anymore. Just fill something else that you already know you do well with or that you are still working toward. That way, you still have the energy and the motivation and even the artistic and creative integrity to come back to it. Like I'm sorry, it's just so beautiful the way that you put it.
No, you make some very good points. And kind of one of the things like I think we've all noticed and kind of experiencing ourselves with that burnout. Kristen, what are some of the things that our listeners might be missing in their lives that's kind of against some subtle clues that maybe like they aren't picking up? Like, okay, maybe it's time to start looking for that other cup and kind of put the instrument, the musician cup down, or what some other cup that they've been putting a little bit too much in down.
Take a pause for a second.
Okay,
I hope
good
my
job,
mic didn't pick that up. Yeah, so I could tell you all of the different things I'm interested in, and I think as a listener or somebody else out there would be like, yeah, that's not me. So it's really personal. It's really personal. I think that it's really areas that bring you joy, areas that you enjoy doing what you enjoy doing. Some examples could be hobbies. I mentioned earlier, I love gardening, and I think gardening was a big piece that gave way more to me than I ever would have imagined or asked of it. It was my first summer off after I was teaching, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know what hobbies were. I had come straight from being an private lesson teacher, full year, always hustling, always moving, always doing that. And all of a sudden, it felt like I crashed into the summertime, and I was like, now what? I didn't know what to do. I was like, okay, I've slept, I've done the things. Like I'm 2 weeks and 3 weeks into the summer. Now what? And I didn't know what I enjoyed doing. Some people love playing video games. Great. Some people love going for walks, being outside, doing summer activities. Some people love doing winter activities. Some people love coloring, reading, listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks, shopping online. Right. I think that there's other areas like what do you enjoy doing? That can fill your cup, fill your bucket. Now, I think everybody again would experience that very differently.
Yeah.
So I think just if you're looking at it from a hobby standpoint, like, yeah, maybe just list some one or two things that you enjoy. Maybe some things you want to try. Maybe you're watching a show and you're like, that looks like fun. Write that down.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe just research it. Yeah.
Are there some things that you would say are maybe like clues that like you were at a point where like you need to find that thing? It's like, okay, things are the
Mm.
tension is getting high. We're getting a little close to burnout. What might be
Hmm.
some clues that people would see like in themselves that they're getting kind of close to that burnout?
I think a big clue. I know there's when we look at burnout, I think we can look at burnout in different phases and different levels. I think one thing is to look at what you are spending your time focused on, thinking about. If you're only thinking about this one thing, such as I have to prepare for this audition, and I'm only thinking about preparing for the audition, and I'm stressed out about the audition, that might be a sign to change activities, to do something different. I think that could be a great way to also say, am I turning down every opportunity for hanging out with people? We can see isolation show up quite often. Are you having a hard time even like on a deeper level? Like, are we having trouble getting up in the morning? Are we feeling like we can never rest? Are we feeling like when we do rest, we can't even turn our mind off there? Those are signs that I think are more on the extreme side that we can say, hey, it might be a good thing to try to do the opposite. If you're not letting, or if you think you can't go out with friends, try it once. Go out with friends. If you think it's hard to walk away from the instrument, just try it for 10 minutes. Put it down, go away, come back. Great. So I think like those are some signs if we're looking at burnout on the idea that also it's like, I don't want to practice, but I'm kind of forcing myself to, and we push beyond that moment of frustration, in which then now you're incorporating tension into your performance, into your preparation. You're now practicing stress, which means when you perform, you're probably going to feel stressed. So you're practicing. It's like, I think those are also other signals too, that it might be time to kind of take a step back and do something different. So I think whether we're looking at it through like a counseling lens, where it's like on a deeper level, like we're starting to notice other symptoms coming up that are affecting our mental health, or if we're looking at it like, wow, I feel tense every time I perform, well, you might be practicing tense. You might be practicing stressed out. Those are the times that we need to actually be able to set our instrument down, or set our craft down. You can't set your voice down, but maybe walk away from thinking about singing, or walk away from what you're doing in that moment. If it's not feeling joyful anymore, give it a break. And sometimes even taking a day or two is also okay. It's not going to magically disappear. It's going to be right there. It might feel a little weird for like a little bit until you work out some of those kinks, or you dust the rust off for a minute, but it'll still be there, and that work that you put into it doesn't magically go away.
I think it's very valuable. Thank you for that. So with that, I think it segues nicely into time of talking about like, what is performance skills coaching, and how might that differ from something like you would look at as like traditional music instruction?
I think we can look at music instruction as pedagogy. So if we're kind of talking about that piece first, like when we learn the instrument, we're learning about like, how do you read notation? We're learning about techniques within tone, counting, like execution of the piece itself. So I think when we're looking at that, that's pedagogy, and how we incorporate that. How do we incorporate expression and things, emotion even? Like, we'll have those discussions as music educators with our students quite often, and even with our teachers. Like, we talk about how do we access emotion. Performance coaching, on the other side, that I integrate, or mental skills coaching too. We look at what your mind is actually going to during that time with your instruments. So for instance, are you practicing and thinking about what's for lunch later? Are you performing and looking at this music like it's the first time you've seen this measure, and you're like, what? And you kind of get distracted by it. You get pulled in, you get caught off guard. You're like, I've never noticed that piano before. Oh gosh, have I been doing that the whole time? We look at where your mind's going after a mistake. Oh gosh, I just messed that up, and I've never messed that up before. Or even the early celebrations. Yes, I made it to the end. I'm almost there. And then we kind of get caught off guard again. So we look at where the mind's going, and we look at what it's doing, and is it in line with what you're trying to do? For instance, like, yeah, you might be thinking about what's for lunch, and you might be getting hungry, which is a great sign. Maybe stop and get something to eat and then come back. Or in performance, like, is that affecting us because we've been letting our mind wander, or thinking about things that we don't want to be thinking about? Like, oh God, I hate this music. Oh my gosh, I'm going to mess up this shift. Oh my gosh, I'm scared of this. I've messed this up before the last time I played it, and that's still coming back, and I'm going to mess it up again this next time. So then we get to the performance. Well, guess what? We practiced that script, and what's going to show up? Yeah. Oh gosh, don't mess up. Oh gosh, don't mess up. So when we pull it back into like, okay, we really explore where our mind is going, what our mind is doing. It's not based on, am I playing the right pitches, rhythm, timbre, like accessing that. Is our mind letting us access what we want to do, or are we thinking about everything else we don't want to do?
So kind of like the focus of like, it's like the non-musical focus of as you play. I think that makes
Yes,
a lot of
absolutely.
sense. Because I had a conversation yesterday with a student where we were talking about this piece he's working on. It's like visualization of like, you can't go inside someone's head and put the picture that you're visualizing inside their head, but you can get a picture in your head, play the music with that picture to get an image and a feeling to evoke a similar feeling in their brain. Kind of going through that process of kind of that visualization of like, well, if that's where you can be thinking, where you can be focusing, your energy, as opposed to kind of like you say, like, well, where's lunch? Or, well, crap, I've now made a mistake. Because where you can be more focused and more engaged with the music as opposed to all of the other things going on. I think it's really insightful, very helpful actually.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I mean, you initially stated flow state, and man, I love me a flow state. It's kind of just, I use this example with another guest here, where if you are familiar with the Vampire Diaries, it's where you turn off your humanity as if you're, just like a bloodthirsty vampire or whatever. But, you kind of just, you find that inner state of just complete walled off subconscious, and all you focus on is what's in front of you. And, there's been such great performances where I have encountered that flow state, and suddenly 2.5 hours go by in a flash. But also, maybe there are those performances where it's not just pleasure and it's work. And so that flow state can come in handy in both scenarios. And I'm sure I'm not alone in people who tackle and dive into that state of mind. I have a question for you because I now have a cello student who is working on Elgar. Yes, I know, wild that a bass player is doing that, but um, they're at the bitter end before the coda recap. You know what I'm talking about? uh, like the really over emotive portion where, even it dictates it in the chunk of the page. How do you communicate that with like an 18 and under student who's trying to find that maturity in their sound, but maybe doesn't possess the empathy or like the life experience to then be able to channel in that particular emotion?
Are you asking as a teacher or are
Mm.
you asking as a student?
I am asking as a teacher for a student.
I'm asking for a friend. Got it.
Cool.
Teasing. No, I think so if I work a lot with educators as like professional development settings and even acting as a coach for like helping them like spread the good word, if you will. Um, when we're talking about accessing emotion, I think it can be difficult to tell people to feel a certain way because especially if they've never been able to experience that before. Um, if you've never experienced fear, you're probably gonna be like, what do you mean? I've never been anxious a day in my life. What does that mean? Um, so there are tools out there that I think can be helpful in learning about like what more accessible emotions are, and then kind of diving into like, well, what does this mean, and have you ever experienced this, and kind of being able to get them to understand like what that empathy or what that more deeper level emotion can look like. As far as getting access to it, though, I think it can be really hard to tell them this is what you're supposed to be feeling rather than having them generate their own perspective of what that means. Now, maybe they could watch a movie. Maybe there's a movie that they can access, or maybe there's like there I use the feelings wheel a lot with my clients. If you've ever looked at this, it's a tool that you can look online. There's like a million versions of them. Calm app has a really great one. If you just type it into Google or whatever your preferred search engine is, feelings wheel pops up PDF. Go look at it. Lots of different ways, but it starts with a more granular level of emotion, similar to what was the movie? Inside Out.
Yes.
Inside Out with all the different emotions, and then like it kind of expands from there. So the feelings wheel kind of starts with that, and then it branches out, and then you can start to have some of those conversations. So I think when you're trying to have people access it, if they've never experienced it before, like those are ways. Now, if you're trying to get into a mindset in performance, like that goes a little bit above and beyond like what I do, because again, I think that's going into more of the pedagogy side of things, because you're trying to teach them how to communicate certain things. And so I think at that point, like as a teacher, I would check in to say, hey, are you able to get them to crescendo the way you want to? Are you able to get them to be expressive? Or can they play it differently? Can they play it happy? Can they play it sad? Can they play it scared? Like even just like practicing physically, the mind will follow. So if you're like, okay, can you feel more relaxed? Can you pretend you're in a bubble and kind of be more descriptive in like how you might see it in a movie, or even have them describe like, okay, show them a scene, have them describe it, and then say, play it like this. So I think you can have them break out of the rigidness that I think younger students often have, because they're afraid to make mistakes. They're afraid to look silly. They're afraid to be goofy. So I think that first barrier can be like, play it the silliest and the worst, the ugliest, the most excited, the scaredest. Like have them kind of play around with accessing different ones versus maybe one that feels really hard for them to access. And then you can pick and pull and say, okay, here we go to access this. This is joyful. This is exciting. Then we're going to move it to, oh, this is so sad because I just lost my favorite Pokemon card and oh my gosh, my heart is broken. And, so it's like we can kind of explore these different stories and those different monologue, if you will, again going back to what your mind wants to focus on in that moment, versus, oh gosh, I feel so stupid, oh gosh, I feel so silly, I don't want to do this, oh, they're gonna see me. And that's where I think often a lot of the times when we struggle with accessing emotion, that's where it goes to.
It's interesting because you literally pinpointed my students' reactions to, over dramatizing a situation because I think, a lot of her fear and anxieties comes from trying to be perfect. And again, I think this unfortunately leads into, many other musicians as they grow older and they harness that perfectionism for however long that is, as early as this moment where, we're trying to allow the permission for, the students to be free, to literally say, how bad could it be? Okay, if it doesn't work, this is data. This is for
Yeah,
you to then, circle around and say, what worked, what didn't? What can I try better? What can I expand upon? So
yeah,
I love that you were able to just like hit the nail on the head for exactly what the student needed for me, and probably other teachers and their students as well.
yeah. One of my son's favorite has a shirt that says, "But did you die?" And like I use that with my students, like no one's gonna die. Like if you get it right,
Mhm.
great. If you don't get it right, no one's gonna die. You have more information to figure out, like, okay, how did it go wrong? And like, what can we use for next time? Because you're just building tools in a toolbox for things that you can reference. Because like, I didn't have the words for it before this last week, but like one of the things that was described perfectly, as musicians, we are expected to be able to elicit emotions in other people. And like I said, we're not tapping into their head, but we have styles and various vocal and artistic things that we can do with the way that we play that have certain responses. And we're kind of lucky in certain ways that certain keys just sound certain ways. So some composers can kind of cheat for us a little bit. And some things just sound dark and broody no matter what we do. We can't play them happy no matter how hard we try. So it kind of helps to kind of get some of that understanding, like how those pieces go together, at least for students, I feel like, so that they can kind of see what part and what role they have to play in that, as it opposed to being like all the notes have to be in this perfect sequence, this exact right timbre of the notes. Like that will eventually come, but you have to understand like what your role is with the music first, at least in my opinion. I think that's like one of the things with a lot of students where they get that performance anxiety situation, right? Where they're kind of like they want to get it exactly right. They're worried about being judged. We had a really good conversation at camp where like I think sometimes people get in their minds where like if this isn't perfect, like from us as professional musicians, I'm going to lose my job. I don't have tenure. They're not going to call me back. They're all the things, or I'm not going to get the audition, all of those things, because they're real valid fears and concerns to be had. But again, at the same thing, no one is going to die as a result of that act. So it's kind of about balancing that. Um, how do you feel that most people understand themselves and their fear with that? Do you think most people have a good understanding of what's driving them in those moments?
wonder if I could even like bounce the question back to you for a second, because when you were describing what the situation you were just talking about, like, did that feel familiar? Like, if that was for you or for that student or whoever, it's like if you're talking about I'm going back for a moment. You're like, in a way, like a little birdie, you just flew away. Um, of course. I think when we're talking about those fears of like judgment, or even like in the professional setting, like I'm going to lose my job if this isn't perfect, or things like that. Like if those sound familiar, then perhaps that is already because we already know what's kind of driving that. It's the idea that we don't want to be perceived as making a mistake. We don't want to be perceived as bad at our job, or bad in front of our peers, or bad in front of somebody. Like we want to be perceived that something we value is good, and we want others to see that we are good. I think we can enter like performance anxiety, and my favorite anecdote is like every time I'm on an airplane, someone's like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I coach with performance anxiety. They're like, oh, well, how do you cure it? And I'm like, it depends. It really does. It depends. And it's the answer. And like everyone's like, oh, how do you cure it? I'm like, well, the key concept is that it depends. And so I think we can look into like ourselves, and it's like, yeah, we can see what's driving our nerves. We often are familiar with like, I don't want to be perceived as making a mistake. I don't want to be perceived as being silly or embarrassing, where we have a discomfort with embarrassment, or we have a discomfort with the idea that it's not living up to an expectation that we are holding ourselves to. And then also, are we maybe even holding ourselves to an expectation of who we want to be 10 years from now, but we're not accessing that. And so before we even put ourselves out there, we've already failed because we're not 10 years down the road yet. I think often that's where I start to see with students specifically, because they start to see themselves, they're comparing themselves constantly to peers, they're comparing themselves constantly to even you as a teacher, or to recordings, or with the art of social media, everybody online. I mean, right, and that's not, we can open up a whole thing there. But I think like when we're looking at that, like I am not there yet, therefore my idea of perfection, like I'm not there, I'm not perfect yet, I'm not to where I want to be. So it's like a sixth grader beginner string instrument, they're going to be probably playing Mary Had a Little Lamb, they're gonna have intonation things, but if they scratch and if they do things that are obvious to them, they're gonna be like, oh, I messed up, I did so bad. But I think our jobs then as like educators, as coaches, as even parents too, like we're coming back and like, yeah, and what did you do right? Often we practice and we focus on all the things that go wrong because we're trying to improve. So when we practice that way with the idea that we only focus on improvement, that starts to drive our direction in performance as well. I'm only going to focus on the things that go wrong, and we tend to disregard the things that go well. And so if we exercise that muscle in the practice room, we can start to explore how that shows up on stage, how that shows up in auditions. Well, what actually went right? Can we start to exercise that muscle and move in that direction? So I think going back to your original question, like, are people normally in tune with what's going on? I would say yes. But I also don't know if we are in tune with what actually isn't there yet, which is usually the idea that we can focus on what's going well. Because it's harder to tune into that.
Yeah. That's one of the things, the studio that I teach at, one of the things that absolutely is my favorite thing about them. We have master classes instead of recitals. And for all of our students, we, like, you go into the triple master class setting and, you play for some great performer or pedagogue, and they give you feedback. What if you try this? What if you try that? And you go and you play again. You get slightly more nervous because, like, oh, they're fixing something. In this situation, they play through the whole piece. The student plays the entire piece or the selection or whatever, and they get feedback from the audience. What did you like about what they did? And it could be something as simple as, I like the rhythm, I like the dynamics, I like this, I like that. But it's all positive feedback. And every student, my students included, they go up there, they get so much better from performance to performance because they get nothing but positive reinforcement. But yeah, to your point, I say that to reinforce your point. It's like, it's one of those things where a lot of times it's just the negative voice in the head, where we've got the idea of like this has to be perfect, this has to be this standard that exists in their mind of what it's supposed to be. And I think it's very helpful in the work that you do of reinforcing that and kind of changing some of that schema of thinking of things in that particular way.
Yeah, I'd love to take a little detour to celebrate you, Kristen. So you, like me, and like many other musicians out there, we hold many hats. We have a lot of businesses. You have three, which I think is very complimentary, and I'm proud of you for establishing all those businesses, including having launched your own business in 2025. How do they all complement one another? And what was the turning point for you to want to start your own counseling and performance psychology related business?
Yeah, so we're gonna go back to the past for just a minute. I won't
Sure.
linger there long, but if we're going back to where I actually decided to leave teaching, we're going back to post pandemic. And I stayed a year following the return to the classroom and really working on getting back into the swing of things. But I just realized that the world had changed, and a lot of what my students were experiencing was a bit chaotic in their world, and I wanted to become again a resource for students in a way that could help them on a deeper level. And I noticed a lot of my conversations with students at that time, I was working in middle school, turned towards helping them navigate these wild demands and wild times of like hybrid learning, in person, virtual, so much unexpected things that were happening out of their control. And I just found my love going into mental health work. And so I took the risk and had full support from my admin, which was it's it's amazing, and I'm very very grateful to them to this day. That I left teaching at the end of that year. I stayed, and my students did an amazing job, and they were very supportive because they knew I wanted to go into performance coaching and move into this work. I just didn't realize how much I wanted to move more into like a clinical side as well to help a little bit deeper. So I already had my psychology degree in sport and performance psychology. I already had that degree. And so I was able to, in the state of Texas, get my license, my associate's license, which allowed me to practice and allowed me to work in a clinical setting. And I was there for a number of years, became fully licensed after I got my intern hours done. And I kept feeling the pull coming back to music and musicians. And it was every time I worked with somebody who was in music and or education or in this field that we are a part of, I was like, oh, my heart just got pulled back in. I was like, I want to work with these people. So I decided to leave and start my private practice for Bowman Counseling back in January 2025. And I provide counseling services to musicians, music educators, performing artists in the state of Texas. And alongside that, I still had the pull into the classroom. I love teaching. I love being in that world. And the idea of performance anxiety coaching really just has a strong appeal. And so I have a performance coaching business called The Confident Musician. And I do a lot of work within classrooms. I do a lot of work within professional development within educators. I do university lectures, workshops, intensives, audition preparation for individual. I run groups. I do a lot of things there, virtual services or in person. So I have those two businesses kind of complementing each other, because one, I can dive deeper if we need, and then the other one we can save more focus in the moment with, okay, well, what do you want to think about in this moment? We don't need to go dig up the past if we don't want to. Like, we can stay here and focus and really kind of say, okay, like, yeah, we had a rough performance, but now what do we do? How do we focus on it now? It's very much present minded and present focused. And so it's quite different, I would say, within the counseling world, where I do dive deeper into that work. I would have to say, I think my heart also leans more into like the active performance setting where people bring their instruments and we're like, yeah, let's actually play. Let's actually have a practice, private lesson, if you will. But let's just focus on what your mind's doing. like, and I think that's where I started to see like my private lessons going after a while, which is why I was like, okay, we're going to set cello private lesson teaching down for a while. And we're just going to really focus on the mental game and the mental aspect of that. So, um, my third business, you mentioned a third, is Belvin Studios, and that's where I do a lot of my gigging and doing a lot of my judging. I do clinic work. Like I go back into orchestra classrooms and I'll like help clinic for contests coming up, or just even like help teach the cello sectional. And my heart still fills with joy. Like, oh yes, you got that shift. Okay, how can we do this? Yes, you nailed it. And just kind of helping integrate those skills into there without them knowing that I'm actually doing that. And the kids are like, oh, I feel so good on this. I'm like, great.
So
Fun.
with that, it sounds like for you, you found complete and maybe not total success, but definitely, well, no, I'm going to say total success, because you're doing a lot of very good, very valid work in that realm, as a cellist, as a psychologist, as a musician, as a person who helps people, be the best that they can be in all things that they do, particularly with music. So, um, how would you say that others with that could then take that as an example, or should kind of take thoughts to then define success, excuse me, to define success for themselves in music? That's a lot of words.
Very fair. First, I do want to go back and just correct. I am a licensed counselor, not a psychologist.
I'm
So
sorry.
just quick difference is that you have to have a PhD or a doctorate level
Ah,
for that.
yes.
And so I'm a
Okay.
master's level clinician. Yeah. Just for fair
Those are important distinctions.
transparency.
I do know.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we do a lot of similar. So there's a lot of parallels. So I think and thank you for those compliments too. Like I feel like I'm still like navigating these roads every single day, and I guess like the idea of success is like, are you doing what you want to, or are you doing things to help you get to where you want to be? And I look back into my journey, like from starting as a little cellist to who I am now. There were threads of all of this along the way. Like even when I look back at my undergraduate degree, I wanted to do pre-med. I had an interest in that side of things. Even in grad school, I dipped my toe into like the psychology side of things. And I started seeing the pull into like, so these threads were kind of along the way. Even for when I left teaching, like starting to see like the pull into counseling. I never thought I was actually going to want to do like counseling focused clinical work, but I was presented that and I saw that and something spoke to me. So I think when I look back, the threads were always there. And I always believed that if I was doing something that would align with what I was meant to do, then I was doing the right thing. Now that road looked all sorts of crazy the whole way. It was not a linear path. It was not just like, oh, step one, step two, step three, step four. But it was like, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go, okay, what happens if I go back with this direction? And yet they all somehow eventually made it out of this like spiral of a yarn ball into like this, I don't know, it's starting to look kind of like a crocheted sweater now. I'm like, oh, okay, I see a pattern. I see this. It's formulating this thing that gives me excitement. It lights me up. And so if you're somebody out there and you're trying to figure out like what your path is, like my favorite advice I was ever given from the gentleman who made my cello and I bought my cello from, he said, find your niche. Find your niche and then go with it and run and then do that. And in that moment, I was like, I don't know how, and I was in 10th grade at the time. And I was like, I don't know how, but I want to become a resource for helping people enjoy what we do. And that's what I want to do. I want to help people enjoy music and I want to help people do this and I want to be a resource.
Yeah. Wow. I love the idea of just like serving as that advocate figure. And I get the sense of like that immediately just spitting out of your mouth. Just you are fighting for helping people achieve the dreams that they want to achieve, helping them get through performance anxiety, helping them, tackle an audition without fear, how to be the best educator for their students that they can be. And that's all just, it's so profound but at the same time, you wouldn't think to do that when, you're about to be a music student going out to the real world, because as you put it out there, it's not a linear path. And I said it recently in a recent episode, there's no syllabus after you graduate. So we have
Yeah.
to, take all these little switchbacks, go up a couple mountains and maybe get a boat and ford the river. And, here we are, we made our path. So now I want to give a quick close to see what your thoughts are on this. If you were to have a legacy that people will remember you for, what would that be?
Ooh.
I know
Ooh.
we're getting real deep.
Oh, goodness. What a great question.
Can't wait.
You know, I always think that the idea that you touch people's lives when you don't, even when you don't know it. And I think the idea that me not knowing I touched somebody else's life would be that legacy. If somebody remembers that I had a great experience in a workshop one time, and I don't remember her name, but man, it shaped the rest of my career. Great. That's done. I left a little imprint, a little spark, because I don't want to be given credit for somebody else's success because they did the work. I just planted the seed. I am the gardener.
Oh, back to
See
you.
what you did there.
That was so brilliant. Beautiful. Kristen, we so enjoyed having you here. And I would say that you and I, Antoine, learned quite a bit more than we started out with this conversation about how to navigate many different dimensions of performing and teaching and any other facet. Kristen, is there anything you want to plug to the world?
Oh, thank you. Um,
Sure.
Yeah, if I would say, like, if today's conversation really resonated with you, you're a musician preparing for an audition, performance competition, or any other high pressured event, I'd love to help. I provide performance coaching for musicians who want to build confidence, manage performance anxiety, and perform more consistently under pressure. You can learn more at theconfidentmusician.com. That's my website, or find me on Instagram at confident musician, no the there. And if you're a music educator or musician in Texas and you're looking for a counselor or counseling support, you can learn more at KristenBellman.com. Again, KristinBehlmann.com. And you can learn more about all the services there. Feel free to reach out to me as well. Throughout both of those websites, my contact information is there.
Cool. Thank you. Antoine, anything you want to plug?
Nothing at the moment. I've got a project that I'm going to talk about next time, but I got to make sure everything is lined up for first.
Gotcha. Everyone, I'm going to be at the Taneycoma Festival beginning next week and the week later. So if you want to check out our concerts, you will see me and a few other guests who've actually been through here perform, and you can watch it live stream on Facebook, TaneycomaFestivalOrchestra.org. Cool. Kristen, again, thank you so much for being out here and talking with us. We genuinely had a great time learning more from you.
It's been
Well, thank you so
fantastic.
much for having me. Oh, it's been great. It's been so much fun. Thanks again.
Orchestrated Way starts ideas. Opus Freelance turns them into action. Through coaching, tools, and community, Opus Freelance helps musicians build income, organize time, and move forward with clarity. Design your orchestrated way. Join our free community now. Link is in the description.